Started. I'll get you the clicker here. Go ahead and
I
start.
can just do it from here.
Okay, that's fine. All right. Anytime you're ready.
I had my presentation is on the Athenian Navy, specifically its connection to the Athenian democracy. The health of the Athenian democracy was directly tied to the power and state of its navy. When the navy was strong, Athens enjoyed a vibrant and robust democratic process with greater equality and cohesion between the social classes. When the navy was weak, tyrants and other anti-democratic forces prevailed and curtailed Athenian democracy, and vice versa. In contrast to the elite-dominated hoplite military, the navy required the participation of all classes. The poor were given an opportunity to serve the state and thus gain a measure of power, which in turn led to greater rights for themselves. A naval tradition that depended on the muscles and sweat of the masses inevitably led to democracy, from sea power to democratic power. Just as the poor were given an opportunity to serve, there was also social participation from the rich, who became triarchs, and they were responsible for funding and captaining individual ships, thus binding them to the navy. The start of the navy. The institution of the Athenian navy, a bastion and propagator of democratic thought and social equality, was itself birthed by the democratic process. While the Athenians had always been a maritime people, the birth of a large centralized navy was made possible by an unanticipated increase of wealth in the city. In 483 BC, there was a surprise surplus worth 600,000 drachmas in the publicly owned silver mines. The Athenian assembly met to discuss how the silver should be spent. The orator Themistocles convinced the assembly to use the newly founded wealth to fund a large navy of 200 triremes. When Xerxes began his invasion of Greece in 480 BC, the navy that Athens had created needed to be manned. Athens, with a small population only of around 100,000, required every able-bodied man, regardless of class or social strata, to man the wooden wall that the oracle of Delphi had proclaimed would save Greece from the wrath of the Persian Empire. The greatest proponents of democracy and democratic reform were almost entirely former naval commanders, and among them was Themistocles, Ephialtes, Pericles, and the last one that I can't pronounce. Demon stones. Themistocles. As I mentioned earlier, he succeeded in convincing the Athenian assembly to use the silver surplus on a large centralized navy. He also was the first to institute wages for Thete sailors, thus increasing their power. Ephialtes, he was a great reformer that followed Themistocles. He was also himself a former naval officer, and he launched a political campaign that destroyed the power of the rich Athenian elite council that dominated the city. He gave more rights to the underclasses, and reforms included opening the position of archon, which is essentially the main council that governs Greece, to the underclass, moving the sacred tablets of law from the seclusion of the Acropolis to the more open agora, thus making consulting the laws of the city more accessible to the general public than it had been before when it was on the Acropolis. Thetes also were granted leave during the working day in order to better participate in the daily assembly. And he was eventually murdered by the vengeful aristocracy. And the reason all these reforms were successful was because these reformers were able to draw on the support of the former sailors of the Persian War. The next reformer, Pericles, he carried on his predecessors' for a process of democratizing the Athenian courts. Pericles instituted the law of paying jurors. This allowed the poor of Athens to leave their work for a day and serve on the jury of 501 that dealt justice from the agora. He also opened the archonship as Ephialtes opened it to the Thetes, Pericles opened it to the hoplite class. All of these reforms were made possible by the newly found sense of power the common people of Athens had found in participating in the state navy. Universal participation in the navy, regardless of class, led to universal participation in government, regardless of class. Opponents of the navy. Sorry, I missed a word in this. The greatest opponents realized the inherent connection between the Athens and democracy and thus sought to curb the power of one by attacking the other and vice versa. The greatest opponents were Plato and Aristotle. Here's a picture of Atlantis, which we will get to. In the Republic, Plato outlined a society governed sharply by class divides. Much of his work criticized the Athenian navy, and one of his most famed literary creations, Atlantis, is an allegory of a proud democratic vassallocracy, which means society that is based on maritime power, being brought low by a virtuous aristocratic society that relied on the class-based hoplite-dominant lines for protection. So basically, Atlantis was a metaphor for why he believed that a democratic naval power is not good for Athens. The Atlantean society grew rich from its maritime endeavors, but the equality it generated led to degeneracy and militarism. Atlantis expanded and conquered all of Greece save for Athens. The Greek deity Zeus, angered by the lapse of virtue in Atlantis, granted Athens victory and destroyed Atlantis. Plato's student, Aristotle, agreed with his mentor on the inherent connection between democracy and the navy. He noted that the Piraeus, the main naval port for the Athenian navy, was also a hotbed of democratic sentiment. At Athens, and this quote, at Athens, there's a difference between the dwellers in the city itself and those in the Piraeus. The latter are more emphatically democratic in outlook. He also believed that the large population associated with a mob of seamen need not to swell the citizenship of the state, which they should form no part. So he, like his mentor, agreed that the Navy inevitably led to democratic ideals, and he believed this should be suppressed. Here's a picture of Themistocles taking on the Persian Navy.
Wow. All right. Very good. Very good. That's is a good way to take a look at it. That democracy is tied to the Navy because the Navy had to have, each trireme had to have so many people to make it operate. If you're going to have all those people functioning to operate it, then obviously you've got to persuade them to come around to your way of thinking, I guess, right? To get in the boat and do it, because they have to be trained as well. As we mentioned earlier, you can't, you simply can't hop in the boat and do this. Well, let's go to our next presentation. Let's see, the Peloponnesian War, Taylor. Okay, there it is. For some reason, this is there. All right, here we go. The Peloponnesian War.
Yep, created by me. All right, so the war had its roots between the relations of Athens and Sparta. They've been rivals pretty much ever since they successfully routed the Persians when they invaded. And so after they defeated the Persians, the Athenians helped found the Delian League, which was a league that was formed of the prominent Greek city-states to help prevent any future Persian invasion, which was something the Greeks always feared. The Spartans and some of their friends and allies started to see that, in their eyes, the Athenians were abusing the league, especially once they moved the league's treasury from the island of Delos to Athens itself. So Sparta got some of their little buddies together, and they left the league and founded their own Peloponnesian League. The war had multiple phases where they would fight, and then they'd have a little truce, and then they'd fight again. The main phase began when Sparta called a meeting of all their allies in the Peloponnesian League, and they started addressing their grievances. It's actually pretty funny because Athens actually showed up to the meeting, and basically sort of threatened them all and said, you don't want to mess with us because you're not going to win. But they ultimately decided to declare war anyway. And so thus began the main phase of the Peloponnesian War. At first, the sides were more or less on even ground because the Spartan army was the best on Greece, and the Athenians had no army to match it. So they were not going to go out and fight it. So they mainly just stayed behind their walls. So they would and they would be fueled by their navy, would bring in grain and what they needed. And the Spartans couldn't stop this because they didn't have a navy to go out and fight theirs. So it was mainly just a stalemate at first. But this strategy ended up being a disaster for Athens because a plague ended up sweeping through their city, which killed a large amount of the population, including the legendary statesman Pericles. And after Pericles fell, a lot of infighting went on in Athens, which ultimately led to the Sicilian expedition. And the Sicilian expedition was some allies in the Greek colonies in Sicily, which is sort of the bottom part of Italy, were being attacked by another Greek colony of Syracuse, which was allied with Sparta. And so Greece, one, to aid their ally, and two, to sort of get a foothold in Sicily, decided to send multiple, actually, expeditions over to Sicily, initially led by a Greek named Alcibiades. I don't know how to say his name.
Alcibiades.
Yeah, that guy. He's an interesting character, because as soon as he got there, the Athenians brought charges against him. And so instead of going back to face the charges, he ran and joined the Spartans. And then the new leaders screwed everything up, and their fleet was destroyed, and their armies all enslaved. Then they just sent more guys over, and the same exact thing happened. So it pretty much crippled the Athenians. And then the Persians joined them, and bless you, and gave the Spartans a fleet, which was then able to considerably challenge the Athenians. And eventually they, bless you again, they were able to stop the supplies from getting into Athens, especially after they took over their grain. And so eventually Athens was forced to capitulate, and the war was over. What was I going to do if you know what's on this slide? So yeah, Sparta would be the primary power across Greece, until Thebes would eventually overtake them by crushing the Spartan army, and not until King Philip II of Macedon would another Greek power emerge and establish dominance over Hellas. That's it.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay. Let's hear about the Parthenon now.
All right. Greetings and salutations. So, I really love studying the Parthenon, but I really wanted to focus on the restoration of it and how they're trying to build it back up. But then I started looking into how it got destroyed in the first place, and it's actually really interesting, so I kind of just focused more on that for the presentation. Also, there are 4 questions on here, and the first one to raise their, or actually not raise their hand, first one to say the correct answer gets a piece of candy, and the bonus question gets a packet of Sour Patch Kids.
What's the bonus packet?
So, the history of the Parthenon. The Parthenon was built between 447 and 432 BC, and it was dedicated to the patron goddess of the city, Athena. The construction was during the age of Pericles, and the Parthenon was meant to be proclamation to the world of the greatness and the unity of the Greek city-states against the Persian invaders. About 37 feet tall with ivory wait, that's too far. Originally, there was a statue of Athena in the temple, but it vanished from history. Some people believe that Constantinople took it and it was destroyed. She was 37 feet tall with ivory skin and gold clothing, gold shield. If I'm not mistaken, her shield pictured, Aegis on it. The goddess, or not the goddess, the Gorgon, Medusa, had her head on it to terrify people, and it worked. Copper, silver, jewels, they spared no expense. But fun fact, that wasn't Pericles' money used to build it. He used the money from the Delian League, so it wasn't even his money he was spending on it.
Kind of like us.
Pretty much, yep. And then in 1678, it was bombed by the Venetians in a war. The Europe wanted land from the Ottoman Empire, so they battled for it. During the battle, they hid the gunpowder in the Parthenon because it was the closest thing they had to a fort. And the Venetians just decided to attack, and they attacked the Parthenon, and thus it blew up. So September 26, 1678 was the day that they actually bombed the temple, and it burned all day and all night long. It has been decaying due to air pollution, looting, and even explosions, as we just said. And the restoration of the Parthenon has been going on for about 43 years now. It's not an easy process, but they have to make sure that the blocks are exact to the old ones. And with how they built it before, it was aligned perfectly. And here's the sources I was using. So, questions. Let's see if we can go to the front. Okay. So, which form of the Parthenon did you find most interesting to know? You didn't know it was bombed? What do you think?
The fact that most scholars believe that it was the Constantinople stole the Athena Parthenos. I've always been told that the Romans stole it.
Yeah, gotcha. McKenna? And, oh. Thank you. I'm not good at tossing.
I caught them both, so...
Nice!
There you go.
What was stored in the Parthenon during the war? Correct. Peanut butter M&Ms?
Wow.
How long did it burn?
One day.
Yep. Let's see if we can do a Milky Way. Pass one back to her, please. And wrong.
1687.
Correct. Catch. All right, and that is my presentation.
Wow. Okay.
Oh, you don't?
Did you like what, Professor?
Sure.
Yeah,
Do you have any one of these you want?
Oh,
You got a haircut.
I did.
So how much have they completed so far for restoring it?
I don't know how much they've actually completed, but it is better than what it used to be. It's taking much longer to actually restore it than it did to build it. It took them, I think, about 8.
So go ahead. Tell us what you got.
Okay, so mine is the rise and fall of Athens, Greece. So Athens, there's the myth behind how it got its name, and then there's the myth of how Athens came to be. So how it came to be, there was the original Athens king, forget his name, but he was from Mycenae. And so he claimed this little spot in Greece, and they didn't have a name yet, but it was a powerful city-state. And so the mythological aspect of it is Athena and Poseidon wanted to go and claim this for their city. Athena offered an olive branch, and Poseidon stuck his trident into the ground, and seawater came up. Seawater is useless. And so the people chose Athena for theirs because he could actually use an olive tree, which is now what we use to extend a symbol of peace. So after they chose Athena to be their patron goddess, but it's still ironic if you look at how powerful Athens is. It's powerful on the home front, inland, and outland. So you still have the blessing of both Athena and Poseidon, even though he lost. So it's really interesting to look at that aspect. And so after that, we have the golden age of Pericles. And so you know Pericles? Yeah, I don't know why I want to say Pericles for some reason. But we have the golden age of Pericles, where we have all of these great minds and construction and architecture come out. We have our author, Herodotus, comes out of Athens, who is known as the father of history. And then we have Hippocampus, Hippa, like the medical act.
Campus?
No, that's a creature. Should we get the Hippa act?
Hippocrates?
Hippocrates, yes. this is where he also comes out of there. This is where we get the Hippocratic Oath from. Whenever you go to like the hospital, there's the HIPAA Act. It protects your privacy, so that's where we get his from. That's where we get it from. So we have like the HIPAA Acts, and we have it here on campus as well. We just have a different version of it. We have it so no one can look at your grades or your financial situation from the school without signed consent. And then Plato actually starts his school in the center, is what he calls it. And then we have the Peloponnesian War, and there were 3 stages of it. But the main gist of it is that Athens lost tremendously, regardless of what Lysistrata says. We did not win by refusing sex. It's fun, but because that's how the Peloponnesian War ended. Was so the women refused sex for their husbands to stop the war. But Athens lost it, but they lost the war with Sparta. But Sparta held Athens in such a high regard that he refused to sack the city. So it still stayed fine, but financially, they never recovered even to this day. They're still in economic turmoil. So they still have never recovered from the Peloponnesian War. It's very interesting. That was a long time ago. And then Athens is also the birthplace of democracy, just as Rome is the birthplace of the Senate. That was it.
Okay. All right. Are there any questions or comments? Okay. All right, good.